Good evening and welcome to Undoing I Do with Stephanie and a Day. I'm Stephanie Hunnell of the Hunnell Law Group in Asbury Park, New Jersey, and your co-host for this evening.
And I am Adela Sherilyn Dow of the law offices of Adela Sherilyn Dow in Staten Island, New York. And I am also your co-host for this evening. Happy stormy Thursday. I'm still in Staten Island. I'm not home yet. I live in Jersey. I'm not home yet. Is it storming there?
No, it's just a little cloudy now, but that's about it.
The rumbles are coming.
Yep.
Rumblings or whatever they're coming. It's so dark out here.
I'll be happy if it rains tomorrow so I could have an excuse to lay on the couch for a little while.
Yeah, you listen. I need that excuse. It has been so busy. The matrimonial world has been topsy-turvy for the entire last 2 years. And, there's all kinds of trials going on and all kinds of crazy adversaries making up case law. It's interesting. Anyway.
No, I have like 5 or 6 attorneys on one case going on right now.
Wow.
April gets busy for lawyers, for matrimonial lawyers at this, so we're not even at the uptick yet, and I'm already going crazy.
And hopefully we can stop some people from going even more crazy today by talking to them about how to save a little bit of monthly money by doing something called an alimony buyout. I know it shocked fear. It inspired fear in everybody. Well, in our payor spouses.
Yes.
It inspired fear just talking about alimony.
If you think you might have to pay alimony, I get that it's a scary proposition for you.
Definitely. Because here's the thing, you were in an intact home. You were paying bills that were benefiting you. Now you're going to be getting divorced. And the thought of paying bills that benefit somebody who you may not like at this point, yeah, kind of sort of makes my skin crawl. It does. I'm not going to lie.
Just kind of a funny anecdote about paying monthly alimony payments is, we've heard these cases, they've been in the news where a spouse is writing their alimony check with like F you in the reline or like whatever nasty thing that they can think of to say. They've had the checks pre-printed with like the new girlfriend's face on them or whatever.
I had that case and I told my client to not send the pictures of his new girlfriend and their dog to his wife. It's so disrespectful. I know you don't like the person, but I mean, really, let's just start being a little bit more adult about this. Especially if you have kids.
Especially if you have kids.
Oh my goodness.
And
the same thing for the ladies who are accepting the alimony. If it's the fact that it's the wife who accepts the alimony, but and that's being really stereotypical right now, but if that's the case, don't go doing the same thing. Don't go taking pictures of stuff that you bought and saying #alimony money. Please don't do it. Like, leave the Yves Saint Laurent, as it is. Don't add alimony paid for it. Please don't.
Yep, for sure. I've seen that too, where you have that brand new bag. It's a #alimony. Yep.
Right. This is wrong.
But
okay, it makes good social media, but it's wrong.
It does. It's funny. It also makes, unfortunately, cases. You can bring those cases, and people can file restraining orders. You can go and get the judge, the family part judge, to give sanctions. There's things that could end up having consequences depending on how far you take these little digs that might make you feel better in the moment.
Yes, because there is such a thing called harassment, which is in New York, we define it as a continuing course of conduct. Well, that's one definition. Continuing course of conduct that's done for no legitimate purpose. And there's other little nuances to it, but it's certainly not legitimate for you to keep, sending these types of things to your ex. And look, here's the bottom line. Alimony or spousal support or spousal maintenance, as it's called in New York, has nothing to do with gender. It all has to do with who makes more money and whether the income gap is sufficient enough to trigger an obligation for one spouse to pay the other for their upkeep, for their monthly maintenance.
Mhm. And don't forget that, the two of you had an intact family at some point in time, and the two of you collectively just made these decisions regarding who's making what money, who's going back to school, not going back to school. If you have kids, who's going to stay home and help raise kids. So, there's that disparity of income is a true uh, process or procedure in order to try to make the relationship after it ends equitable. Couldn't
Mm-hmm.
think of the word.
And we're going to have a whole show talking about alimony and what it's really for. But most people realize that alimony, for the when you want to just give it a blanket explanation, is ordered so that the non-moneyed spouse can make sure that they are able to support themselves. All right, and they support themselves through your alimony payments. And what we're going to talk about tonight is something called an alimony buyout.
Right. And this is the way you can avoid having to write those checks every month, avoid having to receive those checks every month. And it's available in both New Jersey and New York, and it's nationwide. It's available anywhere as long as you can negotiate it, frankly. But why do you think that's a good thing?
Well, for me, if I had to pay, it's a good thing because I end up usually paying less. Why do I end up paying less? Number one, you're giving a lump sum. You're giving a lump sum right now up front. But when you give a lump sum, what ends up happening is that you get to discount the amount of money that you're giving your spouse. So let's say that you had $1,000 a month obligation to your spouse, and you were going to have that obligation for 60 months, right? You're not going to say to them, okay, I'll give you $60,000 right here, right now up front. You're going to say to them, okay, what is the benefit and what is the value of you getting this money now? And you're going to discount this lump sum amount of money by a percentage rate. And let's just pretend like right now that it's a 10% discount, right? So instead of giving the person $60,000, you would give them $54,000. I'm just using an easy number to make it understandable for people. And so why would you do that? Well, you might do that if you were selling a house right now and you were going to get a certain amount of money from the sale of the house that you could use in order to give your spouse a lump sum today, thereby reducing your monthly obligation every month for the next 5 years. You don't have to take that money out of your regular income. You've already given that person the money up front and you've gotten a discount.
I think it also helps you manage your finances, so you know what you're expecting. You actually get more of your disposable income early on, because a lot of times, not a lot of times, most of the time, when you have two households that are splitting up, you need more money because you don't have either two incomes, even if it's a partial smaller income. When you have to pay for two separate households and you're the moneyed spouse, you have a lot of that money going away, and your lifestyle is going to change pretty significantly. One of the risks, though, with doing that, in my opinion, is the fact that once you pay that lump sum buyout, if your spouse decides to get married the following year, you've now already paid up front for those 60 months.
Right. So let's drill down on this, right? So what Steph is talking about is the termination of alimony. So one of the termination factors is your spouse cohabitating, and there's a term that's called the term of art. It has a specific definition in both New York and New Jersey. Okay, some of it is statutory, some of it is case law based, or your spouse getting remarried. So now if your spouse gets remarried, they already have now somebody who can take up the obligation of supporting them. Where you don't do an alimony buyout is if you're in the middle of a divorce and your spouse already has a significant other, or my favorite word, paramour. Your spouse already has a paramour, right? And they're thinking about marrying that spouse. So they tell you that, oh, I'm not gonna have to worry about any of this because I'm moving in with Janice, or I'm moving in with John. Okay, red flags. Let me just go ahead and agree to this monthly number. because Jan or John or Janice, whoever one of them, is going to have to pay for this person later.
Mhm. You also have to take into consideration the age of the parties, because if you're relatively young, the chances of getting remarried are a lot higher than if you're
True.
an older person and you're going to be figuring out this alimony buyout.
True.
Have you gotten a lot of pushback? So now let me just back up a little bit. A couple of years ago, the tax laws changed. So alimony used to be tax deductible and it was taxable by the person receiving it as their regular income. So there's some
Right.
tax consequences that went along with calculating an alimony buyout. Now you
That's
had
right.
to factor in 28, 25, 30, 32%, depending on how you were making this calculation to reduce the amount of money that you were getting. Now that's really not the case anymore, because now alimony just gets paid. It's tax free to you. You receive the money. So you're really talking dollar for dollar. So when we're
Right.
talking about making reductions, you have to think about, if you deposited that money, what's going to be your rate of return, and you're thinking about how much you're going to make over the term of that alimony. But I think one of the big factors that you have to take into consideration is the risk involved in making that deal. So I think, there's no bright line rule or number to say this is the percentage you should reduce it by.
That's right.
Um, but that really has to be taken into consideration. Maybe if it was a very short term, 2 or 3 years, the risk is a lot less. But if you're talking about a 10-year alimony term, you really have to think about the risk associated with it and getting the money now. And what's that risk? Uh, how much does that risk cost?
Right. And so now let's say that the person who is the payor is a older person, but let's say that they're 55-ish, right? And they're a few years away from retirement. And they know that they're going to retire and they have a 10-year alimony obligation, right? But they're going to retire in 7 years at 62, when they're able to collect a little Social Security and they're finally able to collect their pension and their other retirement benefits. Does it make sense for that person to do an alimony buyout? Maybe not. Maybe not, because you're already going to be in a situation in 7 years where you can ask the court to downwardly modify your alimony or to terminate it altogether. So alimony buyouts really work when you have a situation where you're going to have work for a while, right? Where you don't think that the other party is going to necessarily get married, or there's going to be some kind of change of circumstances which substantially reduces your individual income, right? And so you really want to talk to a certified financial divorce person. I can't remember what they call themselves. CFDAs, certified divorce accountants, I think is what they call
Accountants.
themselves.
I think it's a accountant.
Yeah, yeah. You want to talk to someone, not only your lawyer, because lawyers are not accountants unless they are accountants. Most lawyers aren't. Most lawyers
M
aren't, but there are some who are.
Most of us
You're
don't
not,
wanna No, most of us don't wanna deal with the math, even though
right?
we have to deal with it all the time. But, when we're talking about getting these actual by the way, there's also actuary numbers that the accountant can look into, life expectancy of a person to see kind of how long is the alimony gonna truly be? Is this, there's those issues that go into it as well.
That's right. That's right. And at the end of the day, you it's really like Stephanie said, it really is a game of odds. It really is a risk, right? But let's say that you're not going to do an alimony buyout. If you're not going to do an alimony buyout, you better make sure that you have language within the document that does protect you in the event that you have a layoff. I was just writing this stuff. I have an agreement on my other screen. I have two screens. I have an agreement on my other screen that calls for a sum of spousal support to be paid and waives my client's right to seek a modification in the event that he retires. Well, heck no. I deleted the heck out of that one. And then it waives substantial changes in circumstances. Absolutely not, because I don't know that my client's going to be able to make $160,000 a year for the next 10 years. Or in this case, it's a
Mhm.
15-year alimony obligation. right? Because these people have been married for so
You
long.
know,
Don't make those
I
agreements.
I used to actually see it more often 15 years ago or whatever, where people were always trying to put into agreements that it would be non-modifiable. There's no change of circumstance that you'll ever get to modify this alimony obligation. And unless you're getting something by way of equitable distribution or something
Right.
like that, which would be spelled out in the agreement anyway, that you're receiving a disproportionate share of this in order for this to be non-modifiable, that's never really a good option for you, because you're always entitled to a change. You never know what was going to happen. You could, fall ill and break your legs and never be able to work again. And you're going to have to continue to pay alimony as non modifiable because that's the deal that you made. That wouldn't be equitable.
Not equitable at all.
We've fought those. I've actually had a couple of appeals with those over the course of, the last 15 years or so. Yeah.
Yeah, bad idea. Just a bad idea. And again, people get into these bad ideas because they just want it to be over.
Mhm.
I know that you just want your divorce to be over, but we're not going to just sit here and make decisions that are not in your best interest because we just want the divorce to be over. Because in those situations, that's when the nonsense actually does occur. And 10 years later, you're calling us saying, how come you didn't tell me? No, you're not going to call me with that. So I'm going to make it so that you don't do that in the first place.
Exactly. A few years back, we had a case that the woman got married maybe like 6 months after the divorce was finalized, and we had negotiated. There was a buyout negotiation, and in that case, the judge went in and overturned the buyout and said, "Nope, we're going to look at this fresh." Why? Because you had to have known.
I had to have known.
You're not just didn't just meet this person and say 6 months later you're going to get married.
Okay.
So yeah,
Exactly.
yep,
You knew this person, most likely,
yep.
and you're planning a whole wedding. Did I tell you the story? I tell you the story about the case I had
And I
in,
don't
in the
know.
Monmouth County case where my client's wife actually got married before the divorce occurred.
Yes,
Come on. So if people do stuff like that, and that person was still looking for alimony, I do not know what was wrong with that person or the person's lawyer. I have no idea. I don't know how they even could make the argument with straight faces, but this is what people do. This is what
people
people
do crazy things. People do. I mean, it might not be crazy to them at the time that they're doing it. And they might think that they're being completely reasonable. They might not. They might not give a crap and just do whatever the heck they want to do. But yeah, we have to try to protect our clients from all of those things. We have to
do.
anticipate the worst case scenario that can happen. And that's why our agreements tend to be, 40 pages, 30 something pages. We want to anticipate all of that stuff. And I always, always, always double, triple, quadruple check and let a lot of time pass before we even talk about a buyout of alimony, because I always think this is not the best case scenario, because you're always taking a risk. If I'm representing the person, obviously, that has to pay the buyout.
Right.
If I'm representing a person that's going to receive it, I'm great. I'm every day. Give me that money.
But you know what? So that's an issue too that I wanted to talk about. If you know that you're not good with money,
Yeah.
and somebody's about to throw you $100,000 for an alimony buyout, but you have an issue with like Saks and Neiman's, or you just like a really nice house and you're about to blow that money on a new kitchen, please don't take the alimony buyout.
Mm-hmm.
Please do not take the alimony buyout because you are not going to have any money. And if you don't know what you're doing with money and you're just going to let some financial planner or somebody who plays a financial planner on TV put the money into an annuity that might or may not be put into some strange types of investments, don't take the alimony buyout because you probably need the money and you probably want to make sure that you're not in a situation where this money is going to disappear and you now have nothing to support yourself.
That's a really, really, really good point. Because that has happened where people think you get this free money. You haven't presumably, I mean, I'm making assumptions here, but if you're not the one making the money, you're not always necessarily the one managing the money for the household.
Right.
So you now come into this big chunk of money that feels like free money.
Feels like free
Because
money.
you just get it, it gets deposited in your account, it's in your hot little hands to do with as you wish. And if
We're
you're
headed
not good
to
at managing your money,
Aruba. Okay. You know, I'm a travel person. We're headed to
yep.
Dubai. We're doing all of the things. And then I have no money left. I mean,
Mhm.
I manage money well though. So that, but I'm just saying.
Yep. No, right? It happens. That is a big risk. That is something that has to be considered.
And you know, in the event, so now somebody says, okay, suppose I don't take the alimony buyout option, and the person dies. Okay, well, in that event, you needed to make sure that you had a life insurance component to your alimony obligation. And that's something that we can definitely get into in another show, because that has a whole nother set of complexities, that I was even talking to a matrimonial court attorney about yesterday,
Mhm.
where the court attorney was saying that he was coming into cases recently or as of late where people could not qualify for life insurance in order to secure their alimony and their child support obligations. So it
Oh,
gets to
wow.
be a little tricky. If you know that your spouse has, okay, we don't want people to die, but if you know that your spouse has a propensity to die sooner than the alimony is going to be paid, yeah, you might, that might be a situation where you do want the buyout.
Right. And you have to think about it because people have heart conditions. People, there's a lot of illnesses out there that aren't going to necessarily impact you today, but 2, 3, 5 years down the road could have a serious implication, and it would be like an instant thing. And
That's
things you
right.
can't anticipate, but I'm just talking about people who have,
Right.
these
Right.
issues.
Right.
And
Exactly.
and if they have a heart issue, they're gonna have a harder time to get insurance.
This is true. And if that's the case and they do pass away, you're not going to get anything. So
Nothing.
you might want to think about that. There are so many considerations when getting divorced. People think that this stuff is easy peasy lemon squeezy and it's just chopping up assets. It's not. There
Mhm.
are a number of considerations to make, and you need to really sit down with an attorney and a financial advisor who is accredited to make these decisions. Don't just go, making decisions quickly because you want to get out of it, or you have another entanglement waiting.
And by the way, that's why I always advocate it doesn't have to be us. It has to you need to go to an experienced family law matrimonial attorney. I mean, we recognize all of these issues because we've seen them, we've read cases, we've like talked to other people who have had these experiences. As attorneys, matrimonial attorneys, we all vent to each other about this particular crazy case that we might have. So we have a lot of shared experiences as well. And so when people come into the office and they say, "Oh yeah, I just had, my dad's cousin's friend who's a tax attorney who just went and reviewed this for me and it's all good. He said everything is fine." And then you look at it and you realize that it's actually not all fine. They left out a whole bunch of stuff.
Because an attorney is not an attorney. Like, I mean, people need to understand. If I'm a med mal attorney, I probably shouldn't be reviewing your divorce documents. I mean, I can tell you where this stuff makes sense, but I can't tell you that this is what a judge in a matrimonial action might do. So let's not confuse the Esquires.
Mhm.
Let's get somebody who really does this day in and day out.
Yep. And guess what? I'm not trying to tell anybody how to resolve a med mal case either.
I am not.
Not.
I am
Not.
not. Now I'm here for the check because those people make great money. I'm here for the check, but I'm not actually here to help you out with that because I don't know what I'm doing and you're about to just lose your
Yeah.
money. You're about to lose your case with me on that.
Oh, hi, Rafi.
Hi. Oh, we need to meet Robbie. Okay,
Uh-huh.
hey John. But yeah, this has been a great show, if I should say so myself. No, Steph?
Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in 2 Thursdays.
in 2 Thursdays. See you then.
See you
Bye.
then. Bye.